The first time I saw Nova Spire, I understood why the galaxy called it the heart of civilization. The station stretched across space like an artificial world, its towering rings crowded with ships from hundreds of civilizations. Every treaty, alliance, and dispute eventually found its way here. Humanity, however, occupied only a modest diplomatic balcony near the edge of the Grand Assembly chamber. We were new, inexperienced, and largely ignored. I sat quietly as reports flowed from one delegate to another until an Asteron Union representative requested the floor. His engineering vessel, crippled near Earth's system, had accepted emergency assistance from human mechanics. The chamber stirred with curiosity. Our propulsion system was beyond repair, he announced. The humans did not repair it. They redesigned it. Murmurs spread through the hall. Ancient civilizations dismissed the claim with polite smiles, insisting primitive engineers could never improve technology refined over millennia. I remained silent. The mechanics back home had never cared about recognition. To them, a broken machine was simply a problem waiting for a solution. The assembly laughed softly, unaware that before this meeting ended, the entire galaxy would begin seeing humanity very differently. The laughter had not completely faded when the chamber lights shifted from white to deep crimson. Every conversation stopped. Across the enormous dome, holographic displays dissolved into warning symbols recognized by every civilization in the assembly. The change was immediate. Delegates who had been smiling only seconds before now sat perfectly still. Emergency interruptions were reserved for events capable of changing the fate of entire sectors. The speaker struck the crystal staff once. Military intelligence has invoked Priority 1. The central platform disappeared beneath a three-dimensional star map. Hundreds of systems illuminated in soft blue while a growing cluster of crimson icons expanded steadily toward the unexplored frontier. The formation was unmistakable. Even before the intelligence officer spoke, everyone knew whose fleet they were watching. The Crimson Dominion has begun a full military mobilization. No one interrupted. Their border fleets have been reinforced. Industrial production has tripled. Long-range reconnaissance groups have entered neutral space. Supply convoys are assembling along 6 independent invasion routes. The officer enlarged the map until thousands of warships appeared as glowing red points. We estimate no less than 18,000 combat vessels are currently in motion. A wave of uneasy whispers spread through the chamber. The Crimson Dominion was older than many civilizations represented in Nova Spire. Entire species had disappeared beneath its expansion. Wherever the Dominion declared a civilization dangerous, diplomacy ended before it began. History recorded no negotiations, only surrender or extinction. The Dominion has identified a developing species they consider a future strategic threat, the officer continued. A silence heavier than any argument settled across the assembly. We have not yet determined the target world. Several senators immediately demanded additional reconnaissance. Others proposed emergency defensive alliances. Ancient rivals exchanged anxious glances, suddenly united by the same fear. If the target is outside assembly protection, one delegate said quietly, they will erase it before we can intervene. No one challenged the statement. The star map continued updating in real time as crimson markers advanced across unexplored sectors. Somewhere beyond the frontier, an entire civilization had unknowingly become the focus of the greatest military machine in known space. For the first time since arriving at Nova Spire, I felt an uneasy certainty settle in my mind. The Dominion was hunting someone. And I could not shake the feeling that the hunt was already much closer to Earth than anyone in this chamber believed. No one noticed when I rose from my seat. Compared to the towering ambassadors surrounding me, I was easy to overlook. Humanity's delegation occupied the outermost tier of the chamber, a reminder that Earth had only recently joined the community of interstellar nations. I walked calmly toward the central platform, feeling hundreds of curious eyes follow me only after the speaker acknowledged my request to speak. The representative from Earth has the floor. I inclined my head respectfully before looking at the expanding crimson formations suspended above the chamber. I have a question, I said. The speaker nodded. Proceed. I folded my hands behind my back. Has the Assembly considered the possibility that the civilization targeted by the Crimson Dominion is my own? For a heartbeat, absolute silence filled the chamber. Then came restrained smiles. Several delegates exchanged amused glances, while others lowered their eyes to conceal polite laughter. The suggestion seemed almost flattering in its optimism. An elderly senator from the Kelleran Republic answered first. Ambassador Mitchell, the Dominion chooses rivals capable of altering the balance of power. Another delegate added, Earth has only recently achieved faster than light travel. A third spread 4 elegant hands. You possess remarkable engineers, yes, but remarkable engineers do not make an existential threat. Soft laughter rippled through the chamber. Our intelligence indicates the Dominion studies civilizations with expanding military influence, another senator explained. Your species has neither the fleet size nor the industrial infrastructure to warrant such attention. I listened without interruption. Every statement was delivered with genuine courtesy rather than contempt. From their perspective, humanity truly was insignificant beside empires that had ruled the stars for thousands of years. We maintained a modest fleet, traded peacefully, and rarely projected force beyond our own region. The speaker offered me an apologetic smile. I believe your concern is understandable, Ambassador, but it is highly unlikely the Dominion would devote such resources to a civilization still finding its place among the stars. I slowly nodded. Perhaps, I replied. Then I looked once more at the Crimson Fleet creeping steadily across the holographic frontier. For reasons I could not yet explain, reassurance brought me no comfort at all. I waited until the quiet returned before speaking again. No one hurried me. Diplomacy, unlike war, valued patience. If the Crimson Dominion comes for Earth, I said, my voice carrying across the vast chamber, humanity will not ask another civilization to fight our war. Several delegates exchanged approving nods. That sounded reasonable, predictable, a young species accepting responsibility for its own fate. I continued, but anyone who chooses to stand beside us will never stand alone again. The words lingered beneath the crystal dome. No threat accompanied them, no dramatic gesture. I simply stood with my hands folded behind my back, meeting the eyes of ambassadors who had governed interstellar empires longer than human civilization had existed. For several seconds, no one answered. Then a quiet chuckle echoed from the upper tiers. Another followed. Soon restrained laughter spread through the chamber, softer than before but no less dismissive. It was not cruel. If anything, it carried a note of sympathy, as though experienced adults were listening to an idealistic newcomer determined to face realities he did not yet understand. An elder from the Varel Concord inclined his silver head. Ambassador Mitchell, loyalty is admirable, but loyalty cannot replace fleets. A senator from the Helian Compact added, nor can determination replace centuries of military doctrine. Others voiced similar opinions. Courage is valuable, so is optimism. Neither stops orbital bombardment. I accepted every comment with the same calm expression. They believed they were offering wisdom earned through generations of conflict. None of them spoke from arrogance alone. They had watched civilizations disappear because confidence exceeded capability. From their perspective, they were trying to spare humanity from making the same mistake. The speaker regarded me thoughtfully. Would Earth truly refuse military assistance if the Dominion attacked? We would accept friends, I answered. Never obligations. Several translators hesitated before rendering the distinction into dozens of languages. I could almost hear the confusion spreading through the hall. Among many species, alliances were contracts balanced by equal commitments and carefully measured debts. Humanity viewed them differently. Friendship could not be negotiated into existence, nor purchased with favorable trade agreements. It was proven when the cost became real. The Assembly did not understand that. Not yet. They still believed my words were hopeful diplomacy rather than a simple statement of human principle. History would remember them very differently. The debate resumed almost immediately after I returned to my seat, as though my statement had been little more than an interesting interruption. One delegate after another requested permission to speak, each presenting a different assessment of humanity's chances should the Crimson Dominion truly set its sights on Earth. Their conclusions differed in detail, but not in outcome. The Dominion has erased civilizations older than my own, declared a military advisor from the Norrell coalition. They possess fleets measured in tens of thousands, supported by industries that have operated continuously for centuries. Earth cannot survive such a campaign. A senator from the Helion Compact activated a strategic projection above the chamber. Blue symbols representing Earth's known defenses appeared against a sea of Crimson Dominion warships. The mathematical outcome is unavoidable, she explained. Human losses would exceed 99% within the opening phase. No one disputed the calculation. Another representative suggested a humanitarian response instead of military intervention. We should begin evacuation planning immediately. Earth possesses talented scientists and engineers. They could strengthen existing assembly members if relocated before the invasion. Several delegates voiced their approval. Preserve their knowledge, relocate their research institutions, save those who can still contribute. The discussion continued with remarkable efficiency. Entire committees were proposed before anyone considered asking what humanity actually wanted. One veteran diplomat finally turned toward me. Ambassador Mitchell, if evacuation becomes necessary, how many specialists could your government transport within 30 standard days? I answered without hesitation. None. He frowned. You would refuse assistance? We would refuse abandonment. A quiet murmur spread across the chamber. Another delegate leaned forward. You misunderstand. We are attempting to preserve your civilization. No, I replied calmly. You are attempting to preserve pieces of it. The chamber fell silent again. Our families are not remaining behind while our engineers escape. Our cities are not expendable because our universities survive. Humanity does not separate its future from its people. An elderly senator sighed with visible disappointment. Then your species will perish together. Perhaps, I answered. But if Earth stands, every person who stood with us will know they never made the wrong choice. No one responded. The assembly had already written humanity's obituary. They simply had not realized they were attending the wrong funeral. The debate resumed almost immediately after I returned to my seat, as though my statement had been little more than an interesting interruption. One delegate after another requested permission to speak, each presenting a different assessment of humanity's chances should the Crimson Dominion truly set its sights on Earth. Their conclusions differed in detail, but not in outcome. The Dominion has erased civilizations older than my own, declared a military advisor from the Norrell coalition. They possess fleets measured in tens of thousands, supported by industries that have operated continuously for centuries. Earth cannot survive such a campaign. A senator from the Helion Compact activated a strategic projection above the chamber. Blue symbols representing Earth's known defenses appeared against a sea of Crimson Dominion warships. The mathematical outcome is unavoidable, she explained. Human losses would exceed 99% within the opening phase. No one disputed the calculation. Another representative suggested a humanitarian response instead of military intervention. We should begin evacuation planning immediately. Earth possesses talented scientists and engineers. They could strengthen existing assembly members if relocated before the invasion. Several delegates voiced their approval. Preserve their knowledge, relocate their research institutions, save those who can still contribute. The discussion continued with remarkable efficiency. Entire committees were proposed before anyone considered asking what humanity actually wanted. One veteran diplomat finally turned toward me. Ambassador Mitchell, if evacuation becomes necessary, how many specialists could your government transport within 30 standard days? I answered without hesitation. None. He frowned. You would refuse assistance? We would refuse abandonment. A quiet murmur spread across the chamber. Another delegate leaned forward. You misunderstand. We are attempting to preserve your civilization. No, I replied calmly. You are attempting to preserve pieces of it. The chamber fell silent again. Our families are not remaining behind while our engineers escape. Our cities are not expendable because our universities survive. Humanity does not separate its future from its people. An elderly senator sighed with visible disappointment. Then your species will perish together. Perhaps, I answered. But if Earth stands, every person who stood with us will know they never made the wrong choice. No one responded. The assembly had already written humanity's obituary. They simply had not realized they were attending the wrong funeral. Logan Hayes followed Jack Carter through the largest assembly bay without saying a word. His eyes remained fixed on the unfinished ships suspended above us, each surrounded by cranes, drones, and hundreds of workers moving with practiced efficiency. He had expected a repair facility. Instead, he had walked into an industrial revolution taking shape in orbit. Jack stopped beneath the skeletal frame of the nearest vessel and rested a grease-stained hand against its hull. "You came looking for spare parts," he said. "We figured you'd need something much bigger." Emily Carter activated a holographic display beside the ship. The image separated into layers, revealing every major system. "We didn't copy your engines," she explained. "We rebuilt them." Logan stared at the rotating model. The elegant Asteron reactor had been simplified into larger, stronger components that could be manufactured inside ordinary terrestrial factories. Precision assemblies requiring months to fabricate had been replaced with modular sections any trained engineering team could exchange within hours. General David Brooks stepped beside another projection. "War isn't won by the strongest weapon," he said. "It's won by the weapon you can repair before the next battle." The next design appeared. Alien shield technology remained recognizable, but only at first glance. Human researchers had replaced rare crystalline matrices with layered composites produced from Earth's own industries. The barriers generated slightly less peak output, yet consumed far less energy and survived repeated impacts without catastrophic failure. Then Emily revealed the final modification. Massive railgun batteries stretched the length of every prototype warship. Logan looked from the display to Jack. "Those weren't on the original plans." Jack smiled. "No, we had steel, we had power, and we had engineers asking what happens if we stop designing ships to survive battles and start designing them to finish them." No applause followed. The workers simply returned to welding, machining, testing, and measuring. Outside the station, another unfinished hull rotated slowly into position. Earth was no longer preparing to repair damaged ships. Earth was preparing to build the fleet the galaxy never imagined could exist. The first human fleet departed without speeches, ceremonies, or cameras. Dawn had barely reached the Atlantic when the orbital docks released the magnetic clamps holding our newly completed warships. One after another, they drifted clear of Liberty Orbital Shipyard before their engines ignited in silent blue light. Every launch was recorded, inspected, and logged, but no celebrations followed. There was still too much work to do. General David Brooks stood beside the command display, watching formation reports arrive from every task group. "Status: all squadrons ready. Engineering tenders loaded. Mobile factories prepared." He nodded once. "Proceed." Beyond Earth's orbit, the fleet accelerated toward the outer edge of the solar system. We would not wait for the Crimson Dominion to reach our home. Every kilometer they advanced would be one we had already measured, mapped, and prepared. Defensive war had always favored those willing to choose the battlefield. Behind us, Earth transformed into something the galaxy had never witnessed. Automobile factories produced armored hull plates instead of civilian vehicles. Machine shops manufactured replacement barrels for railguns. Universities suspended ordinary research to calculate shield harmonics and improve reactor efficiency. Small workshops filled garages with drones assembled from commercial components. Thousands of volunteers packed ammunition, sorted supplies, repaired equipment, and loaded cargo transports without waiting to be asked. Nothing was wasted. Nothing remained idle. Jack Carter walked through one fabrication hall carrying a clipboard stained with oil and graphite. Workers surrounded him with questions before returning immediately to their stations. Need another batch of reactor couplings. They'll be ready before lunch. Railgun coils? Already cooling. Every answer was measured in hours rather than weeks. Logan Hayes watched conveyors carrying freshly machined components directly from factory lines to waiting launch shuttles. I've never seen production move this quickly. Jack smiled without looking up. We're not trying to build perfect parts. He picked up a finished component, inspected it for a second, and placed it into a shipping crate. We're rebuilding the next victory before the first battle even begins. The Crimson Dominion crossed the outer boundary of the solar system without slowing. Their formation stretched across millions of kilometers, every battle group advancing with the confidence of a force that had never learned the meaning of defeat. Reconnaissance drones transmitted the first confirmed images to every command center on Earth. No one spoke. We had spent months preparing for this exact moment. General David Brooks watched the tactical display before issuing a single order. Execute Phase 1. Our fleet did not charge. Instead, it disappeared. Task groups separated into predetermined vectors, drawing the Dominion deeper toward carefully mapped engagement zones. Navigation buoys, disguised as abandoned satellites, activated one after another, feeding precise targeting data to every human vessel. We were not reacting. We were following a timetable written long before the enemy entered our system. The Dominion interpreted our withdrawal as fear. Their flagship transmitted a demand for unconditional surrender. No reply was sent. Jack Carter stood inside Liberty Orbital Shipyard supervising emergency production while Emily Carter coordinated damage control teams that had not yet received a single casualty report. Replacement reactors, shield modules, ammunition, and railgun barrels continued moving toward launch platforms. Every factory on Earth remained active. Logan Hayes watched the production displays with growing disbelief. You are manufacturing replacement parts before the battle starts. Jack nodded. We expect things to break. The first Dominion attack group accelerated after our retreating destroyers. Exactly as planned. When they entered the designated corridor, hundreds of concealed sensor platforms awakened simultaneously. Targeting solutions flooded every human ship within range. General Brooks looked at the firing authorization. Begin. The darkness ahead erupted. Thousands of railgun rounds crossed the void at impossible velocity, arriving before Dominion commanders understood they had been detected. Their leading cruisers vanished beneath expanding clouds of molten armor and shattered reactors. The opening exchange lasted less than 20 seconds. For the first time in recorded history, the Crimson Dominion stopped advancing. They had expected another frightened civilization. Instead, they had encountered an opponent that had prepared every second of the battle before it ever began. No celebration followed the opening strike. The tactical display inside Fleet Command updated with ruthless precision as destroyed Dominion signatures vanished and new formations accelerated toward our positions. Their commanders adapted quickly. Whatever surprise we had achieved was already fading. General David Brooks studied the changing battlefield. Re-probing. Emily Carter looked across the command table. Re-looking for the center of our defense. Brooks nodded. They won. Find one. That had always been the plan. Every human task force could operate independently for weeks. Each carried its own repair vessels, fabrication modules, medical facilities, and ammunition reserves. Destroy one formation and another would continue the campaign without waiting for orders. There was no single headquarters capable of ending the war with one decisive strike. The Dominion responded exactly as their doctrine demanded. 3 massive battle groups separated from the main fleet and attempted to surround our forward squadrons. Their maneuver had succeeded against dozens of civilizations over the previous 5 centuries. It failed against humanity. The retreating destroyers suddenly reversed course. Hidden defense platforms emerged from the darkness between drifting asteroids, activating shield arrays that had remained completely silent until that moment. At the same instant, long-range railguns opened fire from positions the Dominion had never detected. Entire attack columns disappeared beneath continuous kinetic bombardment. Logan Hayes watched telemetry stream across his console. "You turned your own solar system into a fortress." Jack Carter answered while reviewing production schedules from Liberty. "No, we turned it into a factory that happens to shoot back." Even as the battle intensified, transport shuttles continued arriving from Earth. Fresh crews boarded replacement ships before the previous launches had cleared the docks. Damaged vessels returned, exchanged broken modules in hours, refueled, rearmed, and departed again. The Dominion had expected to defeat a fleet. Instead, they were fighting an industrial system. Reports from intercepted enemy communications revealed growing confusion. Human ships refused glorious last stands. They withdrew when necessary, returned fully repaired, and struck again from different directions. Every apparent victory dissolved into another engagement. For the first time since the Crimson Dominion had begun its expansion, one question echoed across their command network. How many humans were there? No one had yet discovered the more dangerous answer. The number of ships mattered far less than the speed with which Earth could build the next one. The battle entered its fourth day. For the Crimson Dominion, the campaign had already become something impossible to explain. Every strategic prediction failed. Every victory dissolved before it could be exploited. Human fleets refused to fight according to any doctrine recorded in Dominion archives. I remained aboard the command ship, watching reports arrive from every sector. The casualty lists were growing. So were the enemy's. General David Brooks never raised his voice. "Rotate the Second Fleet." Minutes later, another task force emerged from hyperspace, replacing exhausted crews while damaged ships withdrew toward Liberty Orbital Shipyard. The exchange happened so smoothly that Dominion sensors initially believed they were facing the same vessels. They were wrong. Earth had already built more. Inside Liberty, Jack Carter walked through assembly lines that had not stopped once since the invasion began. Sparks rained from welding arms. Giant presses forged armor plates without pause. Every completed ship departed within minutes of passing inspection. Emily Carter reviewed engineering reports. "Reactor efficiency is up another 3%. Jack nodded. "Good. Put it into every hull starting now." There was no discussion about redesign schedules or future upgrades. The battlefield itself was the testing ground. Logan Hayes watched another newly completed cruiser leave its construction dock. "I still cannot understand how your industries sustain this pace." Jack smiled faintly, because every civilian factory already knew what it would build before the war started. The realization struck Logan harder than any weapon. Humanity had not mobilized after learning about the Dominion. Humanity had prepared the plans months earlier, quietly converting supply chains, training workers, and stockpiling materials without attracting attention. Across the battlefield, the Dominion launched its largest assault. Thousands of warships advanced together. General Brooks studied the tactical display for several seconds. "Open the corridor." Our fleets separated. The Dominion believed they had finally broken through. They accelerated directly into the empty passage. Hidden across millions of kilometers, automated railgun platforms awakened simultaneously. The first volley transformed space into a storm of tungsten and light. Entire Dominion formations ceased to exist before their commanders understood that the corridor had never been an opening. It had been the trap. The Dominion offensive collapsed before it truly understood why. For the first time in centuries, their admirals abandoned carefully rehearsed battle doctrine and began reacting instead of commanding. Orders contradicted one another. Entire formations changed course repeatedly as fresh human task forces appeared from unexpected vectors while damaged ships quietly vanished behind our defensive lines, only to return repaired days later. I watched intercepted Dominion transmissions scroll across my display. They were no longer discussing victory. They were discussing endurance. General David Brooks folded his hands behind his back. They realized this isn't battle. Emily Carter looked up from the engineering reports. It's a production race. Brooks nodded. And that's the one we intended to fight. Across Earth, factories continued operating without interruption. Cargo elevators climbed endlessly into orbit carrying steel, electronics, reactor components, food, medicine, and replacement crews. Every citizen understood the assignment. No speeches were needed. The entire planet functioned like a single coordinated machine. At Liberty Orbital Shipyard, Jack Carter approved the launch of another cruiser before its paint had fully cured. Logan Hayes stared in disbelief. "You skipped the final cosmetic inspection." Jack shrugged. "Paint doesn't stop railgun rounds." Minutes later the ship joined the fleet. The Dominion finally attempted withdrawal. Not because they had lost every engagement. Because they had calculated the future. Even if they destroyed one human fleet, another would arrive. Every destroyed ship was replaced. Every damaged weapon returned stronger. Every hour favored Earth instead of the invader. The balance of the war had quietly reversed. General Brooks received the latest intelligence summary. The enemy is retreating beyond the asteroid belt. No one applauded. No one relaxed. He issued another order. Maintain pursuit. Our objective had never been survival. It had always been certainty. Human fleets advanced methodically behind the withdrawing Dominion, destroying abandoned supply depots, disabling logistics hubs, and preventing any possibility of reorganization. Only then did I understand what the Assembly had failed to see. Humanity had never intended merely to defend Earth. We intended to ensure that no fleet would ever consider invading it again. The war officially ended 73 hours after the Crimson Dominion crossed the boundary of the solar system. Not with a final battle. With a transmission. Every Dominion flagship received the same encrypted message. It contained no threats, no demands for surrender, and no declaration of victory. Only precise coordinates marking every remaining Dominion fleet, supply depot, communications relay, and reserve staging area our reconnaissance had already identified. At the bottom appeared a single sentence. "We know where everything is. Decide accordingly." Silence followed. Then the Dominion fleet changed course. They withdrew, not in disorder, but without the confidence with which they had arrived. Their formations remained disciplined, yet every sensor showed the same truth. They were leaving because continuing the war no longer offered a path to victory. I watched the tactical display until the final hostile contact crossed beyond our pursuit boundary. General David Brooks finally spoke. "Stand down." Across Liberty Orbital Shipyard, the assembly lines slowed for the first time in months. Welders switched off their torches. Cargo drones completed their final deliveries. Workers removed protective helmets and quietly returned borrowed tools to storage. Jack Carter leaned against a railing overlooking the construction bays. "We built enough." Emily Carter smiled faintly. For now. Logan Hayes remained silent. He had arrived on Earth believing humanity was an ambitious young civilization struggling to understand advanced technology. He was leaving with an entirely different conclusion. Humans had never frightened the galaxy because of superior weapons. They frightened it because they treated preparation as ordinary, logistics as strategy, and survival as a responsibility shared by everyone. Weeks later I returned to the Galactic Assembly. No delegate laughed when I entered. No one questioned whether Earth deserved a seat among the great powers. The discussion was no longer about humanity's survival. It was about how the galaxy would coexist with a civilization that had defeated the Crimson Dominion without seeking conquest, and without ever needing permission to defend its own home. Years later, the battle for Sol was no longer studied as a military campaign. It became a lesson taught in every war academy across the galaxy. The Crimson Dominion had possessed the larger fleet. Humanity had possessed the larger future. Earth demanded no tribute, claimed no territory, and crowned no emperor. Instead, Liberty Orbital Shipyard reopened its docks to every civilization willing to build rather than conquer. The initiative became known simply as the Open Dock Initiative, and former rivals worked side by side where armies had once gathered. When I returned to the assembly, no one questioned humanity's place among the great powers. No one laughed. No one underestimated us again. The official record closed with a sentence that every delegate approved without amendment. Humanity did not save the galaxy because it was stronger than everyone else. Humanity saved the galaxy because it had prepared for the day no one else believed would ever come. After that war, no fleet ever set a course for Earth. Not because humanity threatened revenge, but because every civilization understood the same unsettling truth. If the humans had revealed this much, no one wished to discover what they had chosen to keep in reserve.